Hello again and welcome back to the channel. This is Michael from TOEFLresources.com. In today's video, I'm happy to share my 2025 video about TOEFL speaking question 4. So we'll get right started by taking a look at the basics of this question. Here's how it's going to work basically like every single time the TOEFL is offered. First up, you're going to spend 1 or 2 minutes listening to a lecture on some academic topic. It's going to describe two aspects of some concept or process, and keep in mind this two aspects thing, because I'm going to talk more about it in just a moment. After you finish listening to the lecture, you're going to give a response that summarizes some details from the lecture. You'll have 20 seconds to prepare your answer and 60 seconds to speak. Now, what are these lectures generally about? Well, I did a survey of a bunch of students a couple of years ago, and here's what they told me. First up, 60% of them told me they got a lecture that was about plants and animals of some kind. 17% said they got a lecture that was about business and marketing. A similar amount said they got something about like psychology and learning, and then 6% said they got something broadly related to like art, history, or literature. Now, this list is not exhaustive. You might get something totally different, but these do seem to be the most common topics on the test. All right, so let's get back to this two thing. I want to emphasize what I've always called the rule of two. The lecture is going to be about like two features of something, or maybe two changes that happened at some point in history, or like two ways that something is done, two characteristics of some concept, two advantages of something. It's about two, right? That's what I want to emphasize. You got to be listening for two different things that are related to each other. And I'm going to give you the example in like just a second, so you'll see what I mean. All right, actually, let's get right to the sample. So, yeah, here's a lecture. It's about 1 minute and 45 seconds. So it's a little bit on the long side of things, but it's still within that 1 to 2 minute range. So here goes. Desert environments are places with extreme temperatures and limited water availability. As you can imagine, both of these pose significant challenges for the animals that inhabit them. To survive in such harsh conditions, desert animals have developed a variety of specialized adaptations. One crucial adaptation is specialized heat regulation. In deserts, temperatures are okay at night, but they can soar during the day. To cope with the heat, many desert animals have evolved ways to regulate their body temperature effectively. The fennec fox is a prime example. This animal has large, oversized ears. Now, the large surface area of the ears allows excess body heat to dissipate into the environment, helping the fox stay cool during the intense heat of the day. But that's not all. The fennec fox also has a light-colored coat that reflects sunlight, further reducing the amount of heat it absorbs from the sun. Another important adaptation is burrowing behavior. Burrowing, that is, digging a hole underground, provides a means for animals to escape from the harsh surface of the desert, where temperatures are highest. For example, the kangaroo rat digs massive underground burrows where whole colonies of rats can live. Temperatures in the burrows are much cooler than temperatures on the surface, so they serve as a place where the kangaroo rat can avoid the daytime heat. To further reduce heat exposure, the rats temporarily block off the entrances to the burrows with soil. By spending much of its time underground, the kangaroo rat minimizes its risk of suffering from dehydration and overheating. All right, so that's the lecture. Here's a transcript of the lecture. You can kind of pause the video and read it if you really want to check out all the details, but I'll draw your attention to a few things. So here's kind of what I want you to be listening for when you get the lecture. Here's how it's structured. At the beginning is like the introduction, where it introduces what the topic is. So here you're going to learn that the topic is about how animals survive in dry environments. And indeed, it's the rule of two, right? It's two ways that animals survive in dry environments, or specifically two adaptations that animals use to survive in dry environments. And so that's going to be established in the beginning. And here I've highlighted kind of the most important sentence. To survive in such harsh conditions, desert animals have developed a variety of specialized adaptations. They might say two, they might say a variety, but it's going to be two. It's not always going to be at the very end of the introduction. It might be at the beginning. You get the point. And then you kind of get the first, what I'll call body paragraph. And at the beginning of this first body paragraph, it's going to say what the adaptation is. So in this case, it's specialized heat regulation, and it's going to give a short explanation. And then after that, you have the example of it. It's going to talk about the fennec fox and how it uses heat regulation. And then it's done. And then after that paragraph, it's not going to refer to that one again. Next up, you get the second body paragraph, and at the beginning, it's going to be the same. It's going to say what the adaptation is. In this case, it's burrowing behavior. Going to give a quick explanation, and then it's going to give the example. So, I mean, I've circled the kind of really important things, but it's, excuse me, basically just what I said already. Here's what you want to be listening for and taking notes about. First up, you want to take a note about what the two things are, what the whole topic is, and then you really want to listen for like the main definition, the main thing, the first of the two things, which is heat regulation. And then you really want to get the example. The example is like really, really important. You're going to be asked specifically, probably, to refer to the example. So you want to make sure you get as many details as you can. And then next up, you need the second thing. In this case, burrowing behavior. That's the most important thing you can get. And then the example, which is about the kangaroo rat. So you want to get as much of that as possible. Here's my notes that I took when I was doing this answer. It's basically what I just told you. At the top of my page, I list like, you know, the topic, how animals live in desert environments. And then I get the first thing, which is specialized heat regulation, and I get a few details. And then I'm mentioning the example and as many details as I can get. The second thing, burrowing behavior, maybe a few details. And then the example and as many details as I can get. Now you can see I didn't get all the details. It's impossible to get all the details in your notes. So as you speak, feel comfortable speaking from memory in addition to notes. That's really the only way to get a real perfect answer. Part of it will be your recall, not just the notes themselves. So keep that in mind. And so the question is going to look like this. Using the examples of the fennec fox and the kangaroo rat, explain how some animals survive in desert environments. So you can see in this case, it specifically mentions the examples. So you can see it's critically important for you to summarize those specific examples in your answer. Sometimes it won't, right? Sometimes it'll just say, using the examples from the lecture, explain how some animals survive in desert environments. You still have to summarize the examples, even though they haven't been specifically mentioned. But, you know, keep in mind, there is a little bit of a variety and variation in how this all works. So here's my sample answer. You can pause the video if you want to check it out, although I'll talk about it a bit here. This is probably on the longer side. Your answer might be a little bit shorter, so you would probably say a little bit less from the examples. On the other hand, if you are a quick speaker, if you're very high level, you might even add more details to the examples. But here's how I structured it. At the beginning, I have my own little introduction, just like in the lecture. The lecturer talks about two adaptations that help animals survive in harsh conditions of desert. So at the beginning of my answer, I state what the two things are going to be. And then I state the first thing. First, he mentions that some species have developed specialized heat regulation to deal with temperatures that are very high during the day. Okay, that's the first thing. And then I summarize the example. For instance, the fennec fox has ears, blah, 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 dissipate heat, blah, blah. So I've mentioned the thing and then the example. And then I go on to the next thing. Next, he talks about how animals use burrowing behavior to get away from the surface of the desert where temperatures are highest. An example of this is the kangaroo rat, which digs massive underground holes called burrows, blah, blah, blah. So that's what I've done. That's the structure. I've said the two things. Then I say the first thing specifically, the example, the second thing, and then an example of that. In order to make my answer a little bit more sophisticated, a little more high scoring, I've just done a few basic things. First up, I'm using some conjunctions, subordinating and coordinating conjunctions, like which, so, where, and then which again. I want you to sprinkle a few of these into your answer just to show off your grammar level, to make your answer a little more sophisticated. I've also put in one transition, moreover. Traditionally in my answers, I put in more than one. Things like moreover, in addition, therefore, as a result. I've only put in one this time. I think that's fine, but you could put in more. These sort of things help your coherence. It kind of keeps the answer flowing and connects ideas. So don't be shy about using these. All right, so that's basically it. Since I always get asked for like template stuff, I've put it on the screen here again. It's the same, I think, as in the answer, but I'm going to start with the lecturer talks about two whatevers, and then for 10 seconds, I'll kind of introduce it. And then I'll say, first he mentions that, and then I'll say the first thing. Then for instance, and I'll summarize the example. That'll take about 25 seconds. And then I'll say something like, next he talks about, and I mention the second thing. An example of this is, and I summarize the second example. Again, I'm spending about 25 seconds on that. I'm often asked, should I include a conclusion? My answer is no. Only include a conclusion if you've totally run out of things to say. In that case, you could be like, in conclusion, this is how some animals survive in hot desert climates, whatever. But that's only if you've totally run out of details. Don't specifically try to put in a conclusion, because that'll just, in most cases, that'll like rob you of time you could include like proper, like real details. All right, so I want to kind of wrap this up by talking about how you are actually judged in this case. Now, you could look at the actual speaking rubrics by ETS. They're very long and complicated, but I'll just draw your attention to like 4 things that I think matter. First up is correct and complete details. You're really judged by how many of the details from the lecture have gone into your answer and whether they are accurate and correct. That's a big, big part of your answer. You're also judged based on your fluency. That refers to things like your speaking rate. Are you speaking quickly, slowly, at a normal rate? This will affect your score. Pauses, right? So are you pausing in the middle of a sentence when you probably shouldn't be? That's going to hurt your score. You want to speak relatively smoothly. And then things like stumbles. These are just self-corrections when you go back and fix a word, or when you just say a word like 2 times, like a stutter. That could affect your score somewhat as well. You're also judged on your pronunciation. The AI that scores you, it really seems to focus on vowels, how well you pronounce vowels, and also on your rhythm, which is closely related to your intonation. Whether you're stressing and unstressing syllables in the right kind of formula or combination. And then, of course, you're judged on things like grammar and vocabulary. Is your grammar correct? If you have a bunch of grammar mistakes in your answer, your score is going to go down. If your vocabulary is all really basic, simple words, your score is going to go down. If you have somewhat more sophisticated words, your score might go up. And it's also going to look at the range of vocabulary, so repeating words could be problematic. A few random tips here, just to kind of send you on your way. As I said, I want you to focus on the 2 things. That's the most important part of the lecture, and it's the most important part of your answer. Don't spend too much time defining like the concept or what's going to be discussed. Just kind of get it out of the way in like 10 seconds and then really focus on the 2 things and the examples of them. I gave you a template a moment ago, but I want you to feel free to personalize it. If you're going to use a template, make it a template that works for you, that you like using, that you could easily regurgitate on test day. You don't have to use mine. It's nothing special. As I said, I want you to sprinkle in some transitional phrases and conjunctions. I want you to study grammar. Yeah, grammar study is boring. It's really boring, but I want you to study it. You could use a good grammar book. You could even use ChatGPT to judge the grammar of your practice questions and get some suggestions on how to improve. I want you to use official practice resources. Look, there's a lot of really terrible TOEFL prep out there. So take advantage of the good stuff from ETS, like the TOEFL Test Ready page and the 3 official TOEFL books that ETS has published. They have accurate questions. It's actually really hard to find accurate Type 4 speaking questions. Type 4 is like the worst in unofficial materials. It's hard to make. Also, as I said, you don't need a conclusion. Don't waste too much time on that. All right, so I am going to wrap this up with those tips, but if you want to know more about this kind of thing, you can visit my website, which is TOEFLresources.com. I'll put a link to that in the video description down below. If you visit the website, you can sign up for my speaking evaluation service. You can sign up for one-on-one lessons. You can sign up for the writing evaluation service as well. So there's a lot of cool stuff you can find there. Meanwhile, keep an eye on the channel. As most of you know, the TOEFL is going to change at the end of January, and that's coming up. This video might be my last one about the current TOEFL. I don't think I'm going to publish 2025 writing guides because, like, no one will use them after January. So, I think maybe in the weeks ahead, I will start uploading more videos about the TOEFL changes in January. I've got one planned out for the reading section, so you guys can keep an eye out for that. Anyways, that's just me kind of brainstorming live on the video when I shouldn't be doing that. If you have any questions or comments or concerns, leave them down below in the comments section. I stop by a couple times a week. I try to answer all the questions, and I love getting questions, so please leave a few. All right, that's all for now, but take care, and good luck on your TOEFL. I'll talk to you later.